You know, we are so familiar with the pomposities of the left, their cliches, their authoritative assertions, and we sometimes don't think about them. We are so used to hearing them that we kind of assume that there must be truth to them. And yet I think one of the critical skills we need to develop is to scrutinize what they're saying and recognize how absurd, how preposterous, how unhistorical and illogical what they're saying truly is. I was just looking at a column written by Matthew Dowd. By the way, Matthew Dowd has worked for both Republicans and Democrats. He's sort of one of these Washington establishment types. And he has an article, well, the title kind of tells you the whole story. Us white male Christians need to step back and give others room to lead. Now, the core of his argument, and I'm not going to read the kind of critical line because it's delivered with the kind of know-it-all aplomb that is intended to make you go, oh yeah, that's obviously true. Well, here we go. In the great span of world history, he writes, nearly all change and progress has come from an underserved and out-of-power group pushing, prodding, and pounding on those who hold power to expand it to include a wider and more diverse population. I want to think for a moment, is that even true? Is it true that in the great span of history, nearly all change and progress has come from marginalized outgroups pushing and demanding this kind of change? Well, let's start with some important change occurring in non-Western cultures. The Hindus invented the number 0, obviously a critical advance in human civilization. Did this come about by sort of lower class Hindus saying, you know, give us 0, we demand 0, we're not leaving until we get 0? No, some clever mathematician thought about 0, and there we have it. The Chinese invented the compass. They also invented printing. Those inventions, when they came to the West, had a transformative impact. Who can deny that they've contributed to progress? Now, were there marginalized peasants who organized rallies or sit-ins? We want printing. Please invent the compass. No, none of that happened. Progress occurs in a completely different way. Think about the invention of philosophy. The invention of philosophy on the streets of Athens. That didn't come about by any marginalized groups doing anything. The rise of Rome, which brought laws and aqueducts and the concepts of citizenship. The rise of Christianity and the spread of it, which came through the conversion of the Emperor Constantinople. The Renaissance, the great advances in literature and painting, which came really through the economic sponsorship of the Medici family. Think of Newton's theory of gravity and all the inventions that came out of that, from man's ability to go to the moon. Even think about political events. Think, for example, about the Civil War. The Civil War was a white man's fight. Yes, there was a black regiment, but by and large, these were whites in the North fighting whites in the South. Why? Because the slaves were not in a position to get their own liberation. It had to be, in a sense, done by somebody else fighting and dying on their behalf. Even the Civil Rights Revolution, we think about, was it the case of marginalized groups pushing? Not really. Because when you think about it, if there was an intellectual argument against segregation being made by Martin Luther King, where was the intellectual argument on the other side? Who would you identify as the champion of the segregationist cause, telling Martin Luther King, you fool, you don't know what you're talking about? Think about it. There was none. Why? Because the segregationists at that point were in retreat. Martin Luther King had favorable media coverage. He had the sponsorship of the authorities in Washington, D.C. Even before Martin Luther King, when they were desegregating the Eisenhower, the president, the Republican president, sent in the 102nd Airborne and told the local segregationists, step aside, this black kid is going to attend this public school. The bottom line of it is this wasn't merely a case of outsiders pushing in. This was a case of the establishment, you might say, taking a position. Think about the defeat of Nazism, the defeat of communism. None of this produced by marginalized groups. It was produced by very powerful groups saying, hey, listen, Soviet Union, you can build missiles, but we can build more missiles. Or listen, Hitler, you can amass massive power, but if you do, we will amass greater power on our side to smash you. So the bottom line of it is when we look at the great sweep of human history, yeah, there are occasional cases where outsider groups are able to sort of push their way in, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what I'm getting at here is a supposedly intelligent person making a generalized assertion about change and progress, which when you test against experience, you realize, no, actually, in most cases, change and progress, at least progress for the better, does not occur that way at all.